All right. Numbers chapter 10 is where we'll get started. Numbers chapter 10. This is the road trip portion of our little journey. So we have spent 9 chapters getting ready to get on the road. And it sounds like my family when we're going somewhere. It takes a long time to get us all organized and fixed up and everything else. We got to figure out where everybody's camping. We got to figure out how everybody's moving. We got to figure out how the tabernacle is going to look. And we get to chapter 10. We finally get the horns going. And once the horns are going, then we're ready for the road trip. But the working title for the book of Numbers is The Worst Road Trip Ever. And you may have had some rough road trips. I know I've had some road trips where sometimes it's tough, whether a car breakdown or whatever else it be. And so this is a rough road trip. Remember, 600,000 fighting men, which turns into, most people think, somewhere in the range of 3.2 million people going on this trip. It's about the population of Chicago. And how many people finally make it after the 40 years? 2, okay? Like I said, I'm not good at mathematics and percentages, but that ain't good, If you get 2 on a test out of 3.2 million, you're in trouble. Time to come up with the excuse. So this is the beginning of the road trip, and once we get on the road trip, everything starts falling apart. We're going to start off good, but you're going to see as we go through. Now, what you're going to notice, what I want you to watch for is, if you're looking at the board, the orange streak there. And these are the complainers, and this is where the issue begins, at least at this part of the road trip. The very beginning, you'll notice there's some complaining, but it's on the outskirts of camp. You can't really figure out who it is that's really complaining, but it's those outskirt parts. And then, after a little bit, a few more verses, it's going to be the rabble. That's what my translation calls them. Your translation may call them something else. It's the people who aren't really Israelites. They were Egyptians or foreigners in the land, and they saw the Israelites leaving, and they had a lot of gold, and they had a really big God, and the folks thought, hey, this is a good thing. So they hopped on the road and decided to go with them. That part of the camp begins to unravel. The rabble begins to unravel, all right? And so they go a little bit longer, and then you see the people, and it's almost like when we get there, you'll notice it's like a general strike. Maybe you've worked at the factory, or you've seen companies where they go on strike and there's a picket line and things such as that. What we'll see is every man decides to just stand at the door of his tent, and he doesn't move until Moses makes some changes. And so that part, everybody now is pretty fiercely against Moses. And then we get to chapter 12, and it gets to be the family of Moses, Aaron and Miriam. So what you'll notice as you go down that streak, it starts on the outside, and then it's kind of the outsiders, and then it kind of grows in strength, and finally it's his very family. And Moses looks around and realizes, there's nobody here that likes me anymore. This is pretty rough. All right. As you go down this streak, I want you to think of 2 different things. Most commentaries that you look at, and we love from American culture to find leadership lessons and feel-good lessons from every commentary and everything else, because it kind of goes with our corporate mindset. And many times we kind of create our church after a corporate mindset, so these leadership lessons feel pretty good. And so if you look up leadership, Moses' leadership on Google, Numbers 11 or Numbers 12 or Numbers 14, it's going to give you several things of secrets of leadership. And they'll talk about Moses is the greatest leader of all time. He is very, very good at leading. And that's true. There are many things he does very well. But I also want to notice that if you are a cynic and you run down that streak with that orange, you see some major mistakes that Moses is making. When the fringe begins to complain, when the rabble begins to complain, when God begins calling down curses on these people, Moses is interceding, but he is not confronting the people. He does not confront the people who are complaining. As a matter of fact, you get to the very end, and even his sister is really mad at him and yelling at him, And God has to step in between Moses and Miriam to put the end to the fight. And at that point, you see in chapter 12, Moses is the meekest man who has ever lived. What's that word meek mean? We usually go over and say, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That word meek means humble. That word meek means very weak and not willing to stand up for yourself. That's an alternative way of looking at that. And so there's a strong way of looking at Moses. Moses is relying on God. Or there's a weak way of looking at Moses as you go through here. And you see where Moses needs to be a little bit more after it. Now, of course, we see some times where Moses is having some mental anguish as he goes through this. And there is some history maybe that he's bringing with him from the time that he killed somebody in Egypt and had to go 40 years in the wilderness because nobody would support him. There may be a little bit of stuff, from his childhood and everything else, leaving the city or the palace and what he had there. There's a lot of good stuff that a counselor could spend some time with as we go through there. But notice that as we go through there and ask yourself, is he a good leader? Is he a poor leader? We know chapter 12, verse 3, he's the meekest man who has ever lived. So that's an interesting thing, which you're going to see. All right, the next thing you're going to notice, the nation now is beginning her journey. So you're going to start in chapter 10. And as you go through chapter 10, you see where Moses tells them, or God tells them, create some silver trumpets. And these were really long trumpets compared to what you see today. For a Kentucky boy, Kentucky girl, you would notice it looks pretty similar to what's at the Kentucky Derby. Doesn't it, wouldn't you say? When the guy and the girls are tooting their little horns at the Kentucky Derby and getting that going. All right, it kind of looks like that. Now, before this time, if you're looking at the shepherds, if you're looking at the patriarchs, they blow the shofar, which is the goat horn, the goat horn which people will have. And there's a lot of churches nowadays like blowing on the goat horn. It's kind of an interesting thing. I was talking to a friend of mine, preaches down in Alabama, and they were having a worship a Sunday or two ago at a park. And across on the other side of the park was a denominational group, which was having a worship as well. And the denominational group, he was kind of laughing, my friend was, because the youth pastor pulled out a shofar, a goat horn, and started honking on it, and it made all the kids come in. And he thought, that's better than a class bell right there. So maybe we'll give Justin Odom a shofar and let him toot. But this point, starting here in Numbers, we go to the horns. Now, 2 horns are made because we've got 2 priests, right? Aaron's going to have two boys left. By the time we get to Solomon, there's going to be 70 trumpets. By the time we get to the days of Josephus, there's going to be 1,200 trumpets. And so they really picked up on the trumpet thing and really picked up on that as the priesthood increased and got to be more and more and more. And it's kind of interesting. What was it used for? It was to call people to a feast, to call people to meet God. A lot of quick honks on the horn meant get ready for battle. We're under attack. A long blast meant, either get ready to camp or get ready to break camp and get going on your way. Jesus says some interesting things when we get to the Sermon on the Mount once again. When you give your money, don't give it to the blowing of the horns. Don't have somebody blow a horn while you're donating your money. So you see a little bit of what the Pharisees had corrupted this practice of blowing the horns for by the days that Jesus was around. So we got our trumpet ready. We're getting ourselves to go. And once again, we're getting ready to camp. Now, how does Numbers work? You remember we looked at our outline? You got 3 camping periods and you've got 2 travel periods. And this is going to be the first travel period, 10 through 12. And the other one's going to be 20 to 22, where they're traveling. And so this chapter 10 to chapter 12, 3-day journey. If you look on your little map there, that's where we think they crossed the Red Sea. But we have no idea. A lot of people think maybe it was a little bit further south. And at the very bottom, where that star and the number 1 is, that's where we think Mount Sinai is. Now, it could be a little bit further up where that block is, right above those letters for Red Sea. Most people think it's down there. We're going to head up to Kadesh, which is at the very top of the thing. We're going to get there. For this trip, we're just going to go to Paran, which is where the second star is. 3-day journey. So not a really long trip. We're talking somewhere in the range of 35 to 40 miles. Not a huge trip, except if you're hauling that many million people to get going on this sort of thing. And so they've been at Sinai for a year. They've just celebrated Passover, and now we're ready to travel, and we are going to have ourselves a good time. So you begin looking here in chapter 14, and once again, this is where Numbers is hard if you're into your daily Bible reading. And the lesson is good, it's just tough to get there, isn't it? For example, let's start in 15. Over the army of the tribe of the children of Issachar was Nethanel and the son of Zuar. Over the army of the tribe of the children of Zebulun was Eliab, son of Helon. All right, so you're going to go through all 12 tribes and all of the Levites and wear yourself out. But remember the last lesson that we had? We talked about just the absolute organization that was done. Everybody had a place to camp. Everybody had a place to march. Everybody had a place to worship. Everything was regimented because we're transporting 2 million people without cell phones, without walkie-talkies, without internet, without smoke signals, unless you count God's pillar as a smoke signal. And so what you're going to notice is how awesome it is to see 2.3 million people march in formation and get where they're going. Now, one of the joys of working at this congregation is the preschool. And we've been having preschool here for about 4 weeks or so, and we are now officially in lines when we go to the bathroom. We have finally figured out everybody's behind everybody. We know where to stand. We know where to go to the playground and everything else. And I say all the time, the best Marine drill sergeant would be a kindergarten teacher. Because, I mean, they take these kids and just in a few weeks, we're going directly in a straight line and everything else. Well, here we are. And it is awesome to see. This is kind of a picture of what it would look like, the camp. And everybody gets in their place, everybody goes, and it's amazing to see the movement of everybody who is traveling. Imagine with me if you decide to move the city of Chicago or 3 city of Louisvilles, a little bit more than 3 city of Louisvilles, 50 miles in about 4 days. Could that happen? It would take a lot of work and a lot of organization. That's what we're talking about when we go through here. And so that's the reason those names are coming. Now, what I like about this is Moses had a pledge that he had to say every time we got ready to go on a trip, and he had a pledge every time they closed down. When they got to go, he'd say, "Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you run away, flee from you." And he would say that, and then they'd blow the horn, and they would start marching. When they got to where they're going, "Return, O Lord, to the thousands of Israel." And so they would travel in that way and get themselves going. Now, as you get to the end of chapter 10, and let me find exactly where it is I'm looking. Chapter 10, verse 29. You got Hobab, the son of Reuel. Reuel's regular name, as we know him, is Jethro. It's not the Beverly Hillbilly. This is Jethro, who's the father-in-law of Moses. So Moses asked his brother-in-law to come along with him. And his brother-in-law says, "Listen, this is my family, this is my land, this is what I'm used to." And Moses says, "I need you to go with me to be my eyes. You've lived in this land all of your life. I need someone with me who realizes, first of all, we're not getting lost. Second of all, if some people are acting in an unusual way and I'm about to get attacked." Now, some people have a problem with talking to this fella because they say, well, God's leading them by the fire and the cloud. God is protecting them as they go. So why is Moses finding scouts that will help him as he travels? How would you answer that? Okay, yeah, he needs a scout. You know, John Wayne always needed Indian scouts. You know, you can't really talk about John Wayne like you used to.
And this is the same.
Yeah,
And this is his kinfolk's wife.
right. It's family.
Yeah.
It's family, yeah. And the reason I say you can't talk about John Wayne like you used to, John Wayne passed away in 79. So that's 43 years ago. And so not a lot of people on the younger side know who John Wayne is anymore, bless their hearts. You know, I used to, with my Boy Scouts, do Lone Ranger and Tonto jokes, and those kids would look at me like, what in the world are you talking about? And, you know, I don't know if you can grow up and not know Tonto jokes, but people do nowadays. You know, we're in a different world and everything else, but you got to have your scouts to be able to watch out and to see what's going on. The answer you give, why was Moses not trusting God? Yes, he was trusting God. But God trusts you and leads you, but does God expect you to use what's at your disposal? He sure does, doesn't he? If you've got the 5 talents, if you've got the 2 talents, then you need to be using those talents as well as the power of God. And so that's why we have this going on. Now, the man ended up listening to him, but we know that because he's given some land in Judges chapter 1 and verse 16, and I think Judges chapter 4 and verse 4 as well. We see his family. So we are taking our road trip. Things are going good. Back in my youth ministry days, we got the church van going. You always have that one kid that's 10 minutes late. Drop them off. The parent says, I'm so sorry, and you tell them, oh, that's no problem, even though it's a major problem. And you get going, and you're on the road for 15 minutes, and what does the kid in the back of the bus say? I got to go to the bathroom. Okay, so there we go. All right. Well, that's what happens. Chapter 11, now the worst road trip ever. Now here we go. So people on the outskirts begin to complain. Chapter 11 and verse 1, what are they looking at? They began looking at their misfortunes. The people begin to complain. The Lord hears it. Oh, here we go. Things are going not so well. And so it's just on the outskirts. You can't really identify people. You just know some people are not happy. And God appears fairly serious because fire starts burning outside. And depending on your translation and depending on how you like to read Hebrew, it's either a ring all the way around the camp, and it is getting closer and closer and closer, and it's scaring people to where they say, okay, I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that. Or it's actually close enough, and some people are getting burned, and some people are dying, and then people are saying, really, whoa, didn't mean to say that. Didn't mean to have that trouble, which is there. So that's going on. People are complaining. Verse 2, Moses steps in, prays to God, and then the fire dies down. But that should have been a pretty big lesson right there, shouldn't it? But then, look at chapter 11 and verse 4. Now the rabble, the multitude, the mixed multitudes, they begin to complain. Now, who are these mixed multitudes that we're talking about? You look in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 48. Here you see, people who are not exactly Israelites, and they decided to get on the train because it looks like a good train, and so they're along with them. What are these people demanding? They said, hey, we do not have meat to eat. And so they begin recalling wonderful, wonderful Egypt. The fish was free in Egypt. See that in verse 5? And we ate cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlic. Okay? Man, we had leeks, all right? Garlic. And they say, now, look at us. We're drying up. We're withering away. Okay? Was the fish free in Egypt? What are these people not quite remembering? What was life like in Egypt? It was a hardship, wasn't it? Especially if you're an Israelite. All right, if you're an Israelite, slavery for 400 years. All right? Not good. Not good. As a matter of fact, hey, you make bricks without straw, and if you don't hit your quota, we're going to kill you, kill your family, or beat you severely. All right? Wait a second, too many Israelites are being born. This nation's growing way too fast. So what does Pharaoh decide to do with all the baby boys? Starts putting them to death, okay? Now, does that sound like a place you really want to live and hang out? Is that your vacation destination? There's no hurricanes in Egypt. Not exactly where you want to live. Now, this is a joke I always do. It's something I always think about. We always miss the good old days. You miss the good old days? Man, back in the 50s and 60s, life was simpler. Life was better. Life was great. We remember it. Man, we remember it way back then. It was good stuff. Was everything perfect in the 50s and 60s? Okay, lifespan was quite a bit shorter, wasn't it? Lifespan was about 10 years shorter. Here in Kentucky, a lot of people didn't get air conditioning until the mid-'80s. You remember when air conditioning got put in your home? You remember that? Okay. All right. I like 2022. I like air conditioning. Okay. And I like, gas is no longer 5 cents, but you make more than $1 an hour. I like fast food. I like the fact, and you may disagree with this, I like what we get to eat now. You remember growing up and eating liver and onions? Does anybody miss that? Yeah, I bet y'all do. Yeah. All right, what do you have, Dan?
Anybody that listened to the shows on the radio, which was right,
Yes.
wonder what people with TV were watching.
Yeah, the people that were watching on the radio are listening to the radio. Yes. That's back when Days of Our Lives was good, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's back when Days of Our Lives were good. Okay. Liver and onions. What other wonderful delicacies did we eat back in the 50s and 60s? Yeah, none of you are going to fess up that you remember back then. You remember anything else? You ever eat beef heart, oxtail? Huh? Grains? Brains with a B. Squirrel brains, yes. I went home with a girl to Selma, Alabama when I was in Freed-Hardeman, and I was eating the scrambled eggs, and I told the mother, this is very good. And she was like, well, we were hunting yesterday. It was squirrel brains. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't go there anymore. Okay, what you got? You lived in a restaurant, so you ate off the menu. All right, what sort of things did they have on the menu? Remember cooking with lard? You weren't a lard kind of girl? Okay. Things are different. Well, anyway, that has nothing to do with numbers, so I apologize. But what I'm saying is sometimes we remember the past in such a rosy way that makes us feel bad about nowadays. Now, if you're an Israelite, is it pretty sorry to have to eat the same thing every day? Have to eat sweet biscuits every single day? It's going to get pretty old, isn't it? But it sure beats having your children die, and it sure beats being beaten, and it sure beats being a slave. But these people are looking back, and also notice who's leading it, the rabble. These people weren't Jews, and so, they didn't remember slavery as well as the Jewish people did. So, all right, so we're going through, we're not happy, things are not going well. We are just upset. And so Moses goes through, and God tells him, well, first of all, Moses says, listen, I'm kind of ready to die, Lord. There's too many people here. This is not working. You gave me this job, and I don't really want this job. Now, if you ever study mental illness, depression, things such as that, you're not going to find it per se in Scripture. But Moses, a lot of times, was like, Lord, just take me. Lord, I don't want to be here. I really don't want to be alive. I really don't want this job. You run to 1 Kings 19, what's Elijah say? Lord, I'm the only one here for you, and please just take me to heaven and get this over with. I really don't want to be here. Now, I don't say that to celebrate depression or to celebrate the dark periods, but I want us to notice when you run through Scripture, these people it was not always easy for Moses. It's not always easy for Elijah. We recognize these people from the flannel board Bible classes, and it looks like they've got it made. It looks like their life is easy. You know, Moses must have known when he was born, this is exactly how it's going to go. He doesn't. He's sitting here with 2 million people hating him, and it looks like the end could come, and he's like, God, you know, I don't need to be here. I don't really want this. And so it's interesting seeing the struggle that people go with. And so God tells them, you need some friends. And so they choose 70 elders. These are the leaders. And these elders come, and as they come, Moses gathers with them. God appears in their presence, and they begin to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And so they begin to prophesy. Interesting. Now, why were they prophesying? What was the purpose of miracles? Remember Hebrews 2 and verse 4? The purpose of miracles, wonders, miracles, and signs is to show that you are authorized, that you are approved by God. This is God initiating these people into this work. God saying, okay, it's your job to do this. And so here they go, and they have this opportunity. Now, once it's been shown that they have this role, the Spirit leaves, and they're okay. They're good. But Eldad and Medad, can you imagine having a name Medad? Medad, you dad. All right. No, this is Eldad. All right. You got Meldad or Medad. They're out in the crowd, and they're prophesying as well, and they're able to continue prophesying. Joshua, who Moses was the hero to Joshua, Joshua sees this as a major, major issue. And he goes to Moses and says, Moses, we got to do something. People are rebelling against you. People are angry at you. And here are these people, and they're prophesying, and we got to put a stop to it. What does Moses respond with? I wish the entire nation was able to speak the words of God. I'm not jealous about my job. If everybody else wants to take that job, that is awesome if they will do that. All right, what leadership lesson are we learning there? Sometimes when a person's a leader, they want to be the leader, right? The best thing you can do as a leader is to raise up 2 leaders to fill your place. The best thing you can do to help the Lord's church is to create preachers, elders, deacons better than you. But there's some times that we get caught up with our power, our authority, that if we feel threatened, we're going to try to put them down. And preachers are bad about this. We're all jealous of each other all the time, it seems. The best thing that can happen is for there to be a lot more preachers, because there are way too many churches that don't have a preacher. And so preachers need to support other preachers, and churches need to raise up a lot more preachers. Same way with eldership, same way with deacons, same way with Bible class teachers. Sometimes we get our ego wrapped up around our job, whether it's teaching a certain Bible class, being a song leader, whatever it may be. We need to be training people. And Moses had that mentality. Hey, if we got extra people speaking the word of God, that's even better. And that is a huge, good thing that comes with him. A leader knows how to delegate. Yes. We're in Numbers 11:29, by the way, if we're lost. But yes, Moses had to have those 70 elders. Imagine 2.3 million people, and the only one who can solve a dispute is you. What are you going to be doing all day? Important stuff? No. You've got to have delegation, and that strengthens you and gives you an opportunity to do more things. All right. Now let's look at the quail. When I started college, we're chapter 11, verse 31. I went to an old country church. It was a finger church, if you're around Freed-Hardeman. B.J. Naylor was the preacher. And B.J. Naylor's style of preaching, Every sermon was on baptism. The first 3 or 4 sentences might be on singing, but he ended at baptism. The first 3 or 4 sentences might be on cussing or whatever, but he always preached the same thing. Well, he taught the adult class, and I remember being in the adult class, and I learned to love it. I used to be really serious and militant about class. You know, we're going to learn everything and really get going. B.J. Naylor's deal was like, oh, we're in the book of Numbers. Guess what we're doing Friday night? We're going to go out and eat quail. And so they all went and ate quail, and then he had to get up and tell everybody that what we eat is Bob White quail, and they had Pharaoh quail, and all the differences that went back and forth or whatever else. I just went up and back to the buffet bar and got me some more. But he had the very technical thing. It's not our kind of quail. It's a much smaller. It's called the Pharaoh quail. All right, the people are upset because there is no meat. They're tired of the biscuits. They're tired of the manna that they have every single day. God causes a wind to blow. These quail would travel from Egypt to north of Israel over the Mediterranean Sea. It looks like God, from a breeze, pulled them all over to where the Israelites were and more or less just dumped them. Now, with our Bible translation, sometimes we don't see how much got dumped there. But if you start reading there about how much comes, let's see. Let me find out where I'm at here. Okay, look at chapter 11 and verse 32. The people stayed up all night. Okay. 31. A wind came out from the Lord, brought the quail from the sea, and left them fluttering near the camp, about a day's journey on this side, about a day's journey on the other side, all around camp, and about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. Now, the Hebrew works 2 ways. Maybe they could just fly 2 cubits high. More literally, it says they are 2 cubits deep. A cubit is about a yard. So we're looking at being about 5.5 feet deep of birds. That's a lot of birds. That's the Alfred Hitchcock movie right there, isn't it? Okay, and so the people stayed up all day and all night. They gathered 10 homers and spread them out for themselves. What is a homer? It's a couple of bushels. The plainest I saw was if you have 600,000 fighting men, you're ending up with about 450 pounds of bird per person. That's a lot of birds. God is making sure that they have a lot of meat. Now, how did they fix it back then? You see it here. The Egyptians used to grab their birds. If you've ever hunted quail, you pull them out with the breast, and you would just leave them in the sun. Is how they would cook them, and it kind of turned into a jerky, and that's how they would make it. Well, they began eating, and as they eat, many of them who were ravenous, who were almost crazy with hunger, have a plague, and a lot of the Israelites die from eating all these birds which are here. What you see is the mercy of God in feeding these people, and what you also see is the judgment of God, putting them to death in the way which they beg to have stuff. And so it's interesting seeing how that worked as you go through. All right. Now let's go to chapter 12, because chapter 12 is interesting. Moses now has heard everybody complain. Now the family comes. Miriam and Aaron. All right, they show up, and when they show up in verse 1, what is the issue? Moses is obviously married a second wife, or his first wife died. What is the issue with this new wife? Yeah, not an Israelite. She's a Cushite, okay? Cushite, Sudan, all right? We're looking at the south portion of Egypt, Upper Egypt. This woman, if she is from that area, is going to be very, very, very black. And they don't like it. Now, remember, there's the command that comes out with the 10 Commandments that you are to marry within your nation unless that person proselytizes over. Moses would not have broken the law. This lady had proselytized over. You're going to find older commentaries back in the 60s, which had a big issue, especially in this country, with interracial marriage. And they're going to say that word Cushite can also mean beautiful, beautiful skin. And so Miriam was just upset because Moses had a really good-looking wife. It doesn't seem to fit the context here. But they are upset, and they say, Moses, you can't be a leader because look who you're married to. Now, was that an issue with God? No, it was not. Was it an issue with Miriam and with Aaron? Read verse 2. Verse 2, what's our issue? The real issue comes out. Why does God only speak through Moses and not me? Miriam's thinking to herself, hey, I'm the one that raised Moses. I'm the one that helped Pharaoh's daughter bring him out of the Nile and made sure that he was raised by his mama. Aaron's over here saying, hey, I'm the one doing the sacrifices. I'm the one that gets to wear the outfit there. You know, he's got that high priest outfit going on. He's like, I get to do that. Moses, what is it about you that makes you so important? Moses, why are you so my lisping is getting in the way. Special. That word special is hard for me to get out. Why are you so special, he would say. Well, does this happen to leaders today? Why are you so special? Why do you get to do that? Why does everybody think this about you? You know? Why do your kids get this award at school? Or why do you get that raise at work? Or whatever else it might be that comes up. There's a jealousy that's here. But what I want you to notice is a lot of times in church, in family, and a lot of things, the problem is not always the problem, okay? The problem that people come up with, they think is a little bit easier and makes them look better than what the real problem is. But you get people talking long enough and you'll find out what the real problem is. So they are really tagging on Moses. They are not happy at all that he's had all these things. Moses is meek. He does not stand up. He does not argue with them. God comes down and he says, Moses gets to see me in my form. Now, he doesn't see Moses face to face, but he saw God more clearly than anyone did but Jesus. Moses is my man. Miriam has leprosy. Now, if she was upset about Moses having a beautiful wife, God just took care of it because she has no beauty. She's healed. Aaron doesn't get leprosy because he's a high priest. He would lose his job as high priest. So that's what you have there. All right. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks for this time that we had together.